Hey y'all, we're back again.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about the practice of our words now.
Hmm.
We talked about how our words have the ability to refresh. We want to talk about the practice because I think it's
Hmm.
important that we understand that no practice makes us not perfect. I
Because
mean, I mean, I tell my children that forever. Our practice make perfect. If you don't never do it, guess what? It never happens.
and in Hebrews chapter 6 verse 1, it talks about leaving the elementary principles of Christ behind, pressing towards a higher mark of maturity. And not only that, he said, when you practice what you know, your
Mhm.
senses become trained now to be able to do what God has called you to do. And what we're talking about, practicing the word in Ephesians 4:25, to be able to practice those things, you're gonna have
Mhm.
to lay aside some things. He said, therefore, lay aside all falsehood, speak truth, each one of you with his neighbor, for we are members of one another. That's the
Mhm.
thing that we need to understand. That when I talk bad to you, David,
Mhm.
I'm talking bad to myself.
Correct.
Because if we're a part of one another, and
Mhm.
especially in marriage, because that oneness thing. So
Mhm.
when I'm dogging you, I'm dogging myself. I
Absolutely.
heard
I
a
wish we
pastor
could
say
get
one
that.
time that when you got a bad leader, you got a bad helper. And if you got a bad helper, you got a bad leader, because a home can only as good as its leadership. You
Mhm.
understand what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And the kids gonna be able to recognize that. So
That's
it's
right.
telling us that we members of one another, and we need to remember that when we
Mhm.
dealing with one another as we speak in those crazy words to one another. So we just got to know the practice of words is that we got to remember well. And the next one is guarding your tongue, Proverbs 21:23. What are you
Mhm.
talking
He
about
said,
there?
"He who guards his mouth and his tongue guards his soul from troubles."
Mm, mm,
Because you got to know when you speak out and say things you shouldn't say,
mm.
you have a chance of really getting it back to you.
You're damaging your soul
Absolutely.
is what it's saying, because it becomes a heaviness.
Mhm.
I love what the scriptures say. Oh, no man nothing but to be at peace with him.
Mhm.
I shouldn't owe you, or I'm sorry, or nothing. I just should owe being at peace with you,
True.
and realizing that I need to guard my tongue.
At
And
all
not only
times.
that, Timothy is telling us that we have the ability to have self control.
We do.
We have that ability to have self control, and so that's the thing we need to do in order to guard that tongue. We need to restrain ourselves sometimes. Sometimes that's going to be hard to do, but
We
God is
have the
saying.
ability
And
to
then
do it.
when you have messed up, what He say in 1 John 1:9, that if you confess it, He faithful and just, and He gonna forgive us for what we've done. And then we need to go back to the person, and also
Oh, I love
confess
this
that.
one.
What's that? Proverbs 15:28.
Mhm.
What He say there?
He says, "The heart of the righteous ponders how to answer, but the mouth of the wicked pours out evil things."
Ponder.
I
Mm,
love that.
When
I
we
believe that when we write, we're gonna think about what we're supposed to
Right,
say.
right. And
Then if
not
our
only
heart
that,
is right.
if we seeking to edify and
Mhm.
not tear down, we definitely gonna ponder,
Exactly.
because we want to get them words right, and we want.
Mhm.
And matter of fact, James 1:19 is one of my favorite. Be quick to hear and slow to speak,
That's right.
because a lot of time we quick to speak and hear something
Oh
later.
yeah, we don't really care though. That's
so,
us pouring our
so
stuff on people. We don't really care.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. Sometimes, Proverbs even talk about them thrashing words.
Mhm.
Our intent is to hurt somebody
It
sometimes,
is
and so we need to be
many
careful,
times thinking before we speak. I
thinking
tell
before we
you.
speak, and avoid emptiness and idle conversation. 2 Timothy 2:16. What are you talking about there?
Let's see here. He says here. He says, "Why has it got this messed up
Second
here?"
Timothy 2:16
It
is what.
says, "But avoid worldly and empty chatter, for it will lead to further ungodliness." Ooh, I love that.
I mean, really, really,
I
because
love it.
titles always tell women to don't be gossipers.
Exactly.
And sometimes men gossip too, but sometimes we got to watch what we're saying, and then we can disguise it though. We can say we concerned about folks.
Mhm.
Hey, I need you to pray for so and so. When we
Mhm.
just really trying to get a
That's right.
punch in there. You know what I'm saying, and say something bad about a person.
Mhm.
And we have to be careful. God is calling. And Proverbs 10:14 talks about. When we look at 10:14, he say, "Wise men store up knowledge, but with the mouth of the foolish ruins is
Is
on
at
hand."
hand.
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
at hand. And when we think about that stuff, but God is calling us to think about what we're saying. And these words are important, because Matthew chapter 12 say, by our words we will be condemned, and by our words we will be edified. And so that's the thing we need. We need to be careful, because every word that we speak, we're going to be accountable for.
Exactly.
And that's the thing we need to understand. The main thing is to be careful how we walk, not as unwise, but as wise.
Right.
Ephesians 5:15 tells us.
And then we need to keep things confidential. That's supposed to be confidential. Let's look at Proverbs 11:13.
Okay.
And it says here, he who goes about as a talebearer reveals secrets, but he who is trustworthy conceals a matter. And I don't think we know how important that is to people, that when we tell folk we're not going to be discussing their business, how important that really is, both to the person and to yourself. Because I'm telling you, a lot of times we're in bondage and really don't understand why we are, because we're so far to fellowship for running our mouths on issues that were supposed to be confidential, while we walking around telling everybody. We need to be careful with that, because I hear him when he says that. He says, but he who is a talebearer reveals secrets. Meaning that, you're just not supposed to do that kind of thing.
Right. In other words, what he's saying is, see, you bearing folks stuff. And what he's saying is, you're not supposed to tell what's been told to you.
Exactly.
And especially us being in counseling, we definitely have to be careful, because so many people don't get counseling because what? Because folk tell their stuff.
Exactly.
And that's the thing we need to know is that. And then he's talking about speak the truth in love. How do we do that? Really? Because we can speak it in anger. We can thrash some folk when we're angry. And then of course you got the people that's just the way I am, and stuff like that. Well, God ain't calling you to be that way. It's a lot of things that God is calling us to restrain from doing, and one of the things that He's calling us to do is restrain from speaking of the truth in a harsh way.
Exactly.
And what does it look like, David, when we speak the truth in love?
I think what it looks like, Ronnie, is the fact that, what God is saying is that we're to do it. And so if a person is not doing right and you got to tell them, I just think we ought to not be harsh. We ought to be compassionate when we speak it. And we ought to be patient. Because sometimes, hearing somebody tell you something about yourself ain't always an easy task.
No.
We ought to be patient with them to help them work through what you just told them.
Right.
I've often seen people want to rush in and kill somebody over something they believe they did wrong. But I think that when we're edifying a person, wanting to encourage them, we're going to be patient as we confront them.
Right.
And help them work through it too. That they get to the right place on it.
Right. Well, what is James talking about when he's talking about don't speak against your brother? In James 4:11. What is he talking about right there? Because we do a lot of speaking against people, and God is calling us to refrain from doing that. So James 4:11. What did he say right there? He say, do not speak against one another, brethren. He who speaks against a brother or judge his brother speaks against the law and judges the law. But if you judge the law, you are not a doer of the law, but a judger of it. Look at what he's saying right there. But now a lot of people are misunderstanding that whole judging thing. They look at correction and reproofing as judging.
Yeah, they do.
And that's not what God is saying.
He sure is, because when he goes on to the next verses, he tells you what the deal is on that judging. He goes on, he says, there is only one lawgiver and judge, the one who is able to save and destroy. But who are you who judge your neighbor?
And so when God is saying that when per se judging, we using His word. In other words, it's kind of like what he say in 2 Timothy 3:16, correction and reproofing. We using his words and what he called us to use in order to. It's just like to love one another. He's telling us how we should love one another, and he also telling how we should correct and reproof one another, and we should do it. We should speak the truth in love, and that's what God is calling us.
Yeah, he said, don't be arrogant about it, because as you go on down in that scripture, and he talks about all of that. He said, quit judging your brother in an arrogant way.